Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. Thanks for engaging in the conversation and the great ones we've had this season. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Just surviving the Texas heat this summer with camps and all the fun things we get to do outside in Texas when it's 106 degrees or so on a cool day. But it's all
Yeah.
great, man. No complaints. How about the Dark family? What's the latest over there?
Well, we similarly we got a little heat going on here. I got actually doing a wedding, officiating a wedding today, or actually tomorrow from when we're recording, and it's only supposed to be 104. But the good news is it's windy, and so it'll be 103. It only feels like 103, so it's going to be like a cool day out here. So I'm
Nice.
imagining they've told me to keep it short, and I said, well, you probably should have gotten somebody else if that's what you wanted, but I'm gonna do my best. We'll see. But the way I look at it, they only get married once, so we gotta make sure I'm not just rushing through the process. So, but that
Make it
being
worth your
said,
time. Yeah, make it worth
exactly.
your
That's what I'm
time.
thinking. Once
Yeah,
you're saturated in sweat, what's the difference, right? I mean, that's what I
totally,
figure.
totally. So you're saying
So
if people are like passing out and fainting, it's probably not going to be come from the words coming from your mouth necessarily, but the heat
it's very well maybe both. It'll probably be a
could be
mix of the
both.
two. Yeah, it'll be a mix
Let's
of the
get
two.
that recorded. I'd like to see that.
So yeah, I'm sure it'll be on video. I'm sure it'll be on video. It'll probably be probably go viral for one reason or another. But today we got something much better than people passing out at weddings. We got Jonathan Van Horn. He's executive director of Pro Soccer. He also he has a great book called Shift that basically talks about how athletes can transition to life after sport. And, Paul, I know that's something that you've had to do. I've had to do. Your wife's had to do. And so this is something that I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But, it's basically, I mean, you've seemed to have done it pretty well, as we've talked about on the show many times in your retirement. You're drinking Mai Tais in your backyard, just hanging out, watching your kids playing in the pool, right? This is pretty much what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just all just a lot of rest. Like, just
Yeah.
gotta get myself up in the morning, and cruise through the day by the pool and then sleep at night. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Easy
figured.
transition.
That's pretty much what it's been. I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to raise four young boys in
Yes.
Texas. So
Very
yeah.
simple.
So with that, we're gonna get to talking to Jonathan, because not everyone has it as easy as you, Paul. So we're gonna talk through some of that stuff, some of the other things there. But we got Jonathan Van Horn with Athletes in Action, executive director, Pro Soccer. Jonathan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Grateful to be on the show today. Excited.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, bro, we always like to start all of the conversations with just our guests being able to share their story, just briefly share it. Most people listening probably don't know who you are. I mean, some of your friends and family are probably listening because you've shared it with them.
Right.
But other than them, a lot of these people don't really know your story, and some of them may learn something new about you as you share a little bit. But just share that, how you developed your passion for soccer, for leadership, how you ended up working in leadership with Athletes in Action and helping athletes transition to life after sport.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Michigan, a farming community that also had a university. Central Michigan University was the school there. And we were in a typical sort of Midwestern town where it was football, American football, basketball, baseball, track. And then it was one of those spaces where if you were bad at everything else, then you played soccer. And that was it. But it was one of those funny things where even though I was a multi-sport athlete growing up, there was just something about the game of soccer I just loved. I just fell in love with the game, fell in love with this within this sport that was very unfamiliar with a lot of people, including my dad. And so when I was like, Dad, I want to play this game, he was like, why? He's like, but okay, you're my son. I love you. I care about you. I'll support you any way I know how. So, went to the bookstore back then to try to figure out what is this game called soccer? How do you play it? What does it mean? What's a formation? All that type of stuff. And he did his best to coach me at this young little kid that just fell in love with the sport. And so that was literally the beginning. I still remember those early mornings, the fresh cut grass, the smells, the glimmering of the sunlight on the dew in the morning, like all those little things that really cemented a love for the game. And that was really sort of put me on a trajectory to where I am today from a sports standpoint. And again, I just can't always explain why or how or the reason behind it, but there was just something about the game of soccer that just gripped my heart. And Again, even though everyone else around me was like, why are you doing that? You're better at these other sports, so should play basketball or you should run track or play baseball. I was like, no, soccer has my heart, and I want to continue to pursue it.
Yeah, and you were able to do that. You played in college, right? And then how'd you get involved with Athletes in Action? And I mean, you've pretty much been doing that for a really long time now and gone through a lot of different iterations of your roles and responsibilities. But how'd you get involved with that, and kind of give you a little bit of,
Yeah.
summary of your Athletes in Action days?
Yeah. So it was unfamiliar with Athletes in Action through high school, got to college, and was introduced to Athletes in Action during my freshman year. There was Columbus Crew with Major League Soccer. It was just getting started in the late 90s, and I went to Ohio Wesleyan University, played there for 4 years, had a great career. But soccer circles, as you guys know, is small. Like you know a couple of people and you know everybody for the most part, especially the further you go up in the sports university and then at the pro level. And there was this guy named Jim Schmidtke, and Jim was involved with the Columbus Crew, helping with the guys there as a chaplain with the club, as well as integration of faith in sport. And what does that look like? And being a person of faith myself, people around that knew both of us said, "Hey, you guys should meet." And so Jim and I connected my freshman year, and that was sort of began a relationship that's still spanned till today. We actually had a conversation this morning, just connecting and just catching up on life and how things are going with our families and that kind of stuff. So it was great. And so that's what heard about Athletes in Action, and really wanted to begin to explore what would look like organizationally. So I had a great 4 years of playing, very successful career. God was gracious in the midst of this, little farm town kid from the middle of Michigan to have a career playing, and it was great. And then within Athletes in Action is a Christian-based organization, and we focus a lot of what does it look like to have a faith and integrated within our sport and competition. How do we do that? What does it mean? As well as from a holistic development, how do we care for athletes? And so ended up coming on staff, working with university athletes initially. So it was at the Ohio State University. Again, I can't remember that. You can't forget the. That's really
Of course.
guys. So I was there working with athletes there, worked with the soccer team, worked with men's gymnastics, men's volleyball, a little bit with football. And we did that for about 4 years. That was the first role within Athletes in Action, then transitioned to the pro soccer side of things. And started initially working, back then it was called, the USL was USL 1 and 2. And then there was an iteration of the North American Soccer League, and a number of, there's 1 year was just Division 2. US Soccer decided that was an interesting year. But yeah, I've just been working within pro athletes with pro soccer players in those spaces for the last 17 years. And it's been a crazy ride. Role has been anywhere from a national director to local chaplain for a pro club to content development, video, written, and again, I've had a number of different hats, and now as the executive director of pro soccer for the U.S.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the book that you wrote as well that has to do with working some of those pro athletes, as we talked about transitioning out of the game, or it might be still within the game but not playing anymore. What does that look like? And we'll get into that a bit later. It's funny, the NASL, it's a different NASL than the old NASL, which was the pro league, which we just had Skip Gilbert on, who played for the Tampa Bay Rowdies back in the day. And I remember playing my little AYSO team was the Rowdies. So that was, we were basically on the same team is what Skip was talking about there. And so, but that's a, different minor league. People don't even know about all these different leagues that are going on for the most part, unless you have a team in your community. But it's a lot of really, really, great soccer being played by a lot of people who are just below the MLS. But you kind of glossed over it a bit. You said, soccer grabbed your heart, but you played more than just soccer growing up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a multi-sport athlete. So I played soccer in the fall, played basketball in the winter, and then played played baseball in the spring. And then the occasional track meet. The coach is like, I know you're fast, I know you're fit. I'm not concerned with, can you just show up on track meet days and just run? And I'm like, all right, coach, what do you want? What do you want me to run? He goes, whatever we need. I was like, great.
Yeah.
So I showed up to the 200 one day, and then a 4x4, 400x4. And then one track meet, he was like, all right, can you throw a discus? And I was like, I have no idea. Well, we're going to try today. He goes, we need to. He's like, there's only 3 people in the discus today, and the top 6 get points. So no matter what you do, you're going to get points for us.
That's awesome. It's all about points. All about points. That's what I love it. I love it. That's awesome. But so we've talked about this a bit on the show. I'd love to hear from your perspective, because not only did you play 3 sports, you were at the Ohio State University. Were you there when Urban Meyer was there? Or yeah. So, I read a stat that he had, like, it was 80 or 90% of all of his football players were 3-sport athletes in high school. And, and yet today it seems like we talk about specializing at 8 years old, 9 years old. What are we missing with that? From your perspective, what you've seen, the different athletes you've talked with, I imagine most of them played multiple sports growing up. What are we missing now with the recent focus on early specialization?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I learned so much from just from an athletic standpoint, just physically about my body, because you're using so many different muscle groups. Like when you go from playing soccer in the fall, where there's endurance, I was a center midfielder, so I played the 6. So I'm running, 6 to 7 miles every game. And then I go to basketball, and the quick movements, the explosiveness, the jumping, there's so much that goes into that I didn't experience in soccer. Well, the reality was it actually helped me in both sports. So I get into the basketball, once my body acclimated to the quick explosions, I could play all day. And then I went to go back to soccer, my first step, whether it was taking someone on or defensively trying to keep the attacker in front of me. And that first step and the explosiveness was there because of the experience and the training within those other sports. There's also, I think part of it too is from a tactical standpoint. When you're playing multiple sports, you're forced to think through the lens, through the filter of different idea, different concepts. And so that was something that was forced me in a good way to begin to learn and think about how do I get an edge? How do I just lead in a bit different way? So I was a point guard for basketball. So that was different for me in the sense of how I play the 6. And so those different aspects really helped cultivate different perspectives, different ideas, different concepts that added value to all the sports that I played.
Absolutely. So how'd throwing the discus help you in your playing the 6?
It was called humility.
Yeah. Nice.
I think the first throw was like 10 feet. It was awesome.
That is fantastic. But hey, you got 4th place.
I did.
That was good.
Team.
That was fantastic. All right, Jonathan. Let's move on to we got a lot to cover today. So I want to move on to what would you say is your personal why, your life purpose, and how are you living that out every day?
Yeah, for me is that I want to see people be who God has called them, created them to be at their best. And I want to be able to help them get one step closer to that every day. Like that for me is it's funny, like looking back at sort of my story in my life, and I call them life themes. I feel like we all have these themes that are constantly put across our path through our experiences, through life, through different things. And for me, one of them is coach. And I saw, in looking back and reflecting, I remember in 7th grade, gathering people to learn and to grow and to develop. When I was 16, I started my first soccer camp. In Mount Pleasant, where I grew up, there was no soccer, there was no club team, there was nothing, and there was nothing available. So I created a soccer camp for kids and for other youth in the community. And that's something that I've seen throughout the totality of my lives is having an impact and helping people grow and become who they're called and created to be. The great coaches see stuff inside of athletes, inside of people that they themselves yet don't see. And I love being able to help pull that out and draw that out in other people.
Yeah, love that, man.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that had a conversation recently just with somebody when I was in Guatemala, actually, and one of the coaches that was serving in one of those little towns talked about that. He's like, I never really wanted to be a coach necessarily, but then I just realized how much impact I could make on these kids by coaching and love the game, that it just became more about that. I think that, we've talked about it probably a million times on this show, how it is more about that than it is the X's and the O's and the strategies and the formations and all that. But it's more about the formation of the people. So I love that, and I love that that's part of what you're doing and how God's gifted you as well. So through your soccer career, take us through some of the defining moments of your soccer career, and maybe some that made maybe a lasting impact as you've gone on in leadership roles now with AIA.
Yeah, it's I think one of the most defining moments early in my career actually wasn't in soccer. It was in basketball. I was a freshman, and it was the first moment I realized that I don't have to be the veteran or have to be the senior or have to be the captain to have an impact on my team. We're playing against our conference rivals, a freshman on the varsity basketball team. And there's 2 seconds left to go in the game. We're down by 1, and the coach calls a timeout, sets up the play, and he goes, "Okay, Jonathan, you're going to take the last shot." And I froze in the timeout, like, "Wait, what?" And he was like, "Yeah." He goes, I want you to take the last shot." And so he drew up the play. Play worked perfectly. Got open 3, went to take the shot. I missed it. But what happened is about 2 weeks later, it happened again. And he said, "Okay, Jonathan, you're taking the shot again." And that's when I realized that I didn't have to have the title of captain or have to be a starter or be the senior to be able to have an influence and impact within sport and in life. And that was really, for me, began to set me on a trajectory of that influence isn't based on titles or a number of years playing or anything like that, but influence and leadership can come from anyone. And that really helped me as I went into my university career at Ohio Wesleyan, realizing as a freshman I could have an impact and play and have a significant role. And that was something that was emphasized by the coach there, Jay Martin. Jay had a significant impact in my life as well. And he says he saw something in me, just like my high school basketball coach saw something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. I saw myself as an athlete, and Jay really began to pull out more than he made me a footballer. And he really created and helped me from a leadership standpoint. And he saw something in me and said, I want to help you in sport, but more importantly, help you in life. And I want to help you become a man and what that looks like within the world today. And so it's really those 2 things, really, that, again, my freshman year of my basketball season. And then it was actually on my recruiting trip when really I really began to see something. Jay saw something in me. He goes, "You're the first player in 10 years I've never actually seen physically play myself. I'm going based on the word of other people, and I haven't done that in 10 years. And then he was like, "So you better not mess this up for me." Well, he said some other words, but that's basically what he said. But it was that reality of he was just saying, "Hey, there's what I'm hearing from other people. You have it, and you may not know it yet or see it yet, but you have it, and I'm going to help bring that out."
Yeah, like that. Well, before we move on, I mean, listeners are going to want to know, when you got the second opportunity for the second shot, did you make that one?
No, I actually missed that one as well.
All right, that's an important detail there that we were going to leave out. You were going to leave it a cliffhanger for our listeners. They're going to want to know that. Okay.
No, actually, I missed that one as well. My outside shot wasn't my forte by any stretch of the imagination. I was a slasher, and so garden slasher, and so but for whatever reason, coach kept doing. Yeah, for all 4 years, he kept giving me those opportunities. Eventually, I got better, but those first few were a little rough.
Well, that's. I mean, you mentioned it. You know, sometimes coaches see things in their players that they don't see in themselves, and you just keep giving the guy or the girl the ball. Just keep giving them the ball, you know, and they'll figure it out eventually. And for some kids, it takes a little bit longer than others to realize the gifts that God's given them, and it may not even be that you needed to make the bucket. It was maybe something else that he was looking to do. That's awesome. I love that. I love those lessons. What are, any other lessons maybe from the game that you're using in your leadership? And maybe let's back up. That lesson that you learned from your coaches, how are you implementing some of that in your leadership role now?
Yeah. I think part of it is how do I empower others? That is something within, whether it's other that I work within Athletes in Action, or even some of the pro athletes that I'm currently working with today, is that it's not too early to empower others in leadership opportunities. And so even though they may feel, "Hey, I'm not ready for this," or "I'm only a rookie," or "I'm just getting started within Athletes in Action," like how do I help position people and put them in areas and spaces where for them to be successful and really challenge and grow as a leader? Just like me missing those shots, like the coach never stopped believing in me for those 4 years. And so the same is true with the pro athletes that I'm working with. Some of the guys are like, "Well, all I know is soccer. Could I do marketing, or could I go into real estate, or could I do something else?" And they're 23, 24 years old, but they're like all I know is this game. What can I do? And so you begin to create opportunities and spaces for these athletes to be able to realize, oh, I am more than just my sport. I am more than just what I do in between the lines, so that helping athletes understand that and recognize that is so powerful. And when the light bulb sort of goes on, all of a sudden they finally realize it. It's so beautiful when they finally realize, oh, I am more than just my sport.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to that you're a slasher and your point guard. And I think you described 99% of soccer players playing basketball. That the outside shot isn't great. Slasher, probably a great defender, quick, and and that's pretty much what we do, right? And probably
Right.
I don't know about you, but I often would foul more than you're supposed to in a game. And so you're going for it. You body up like you can
Right.
as a midfielder, right? I know my son struggled with that. He was really good in a lot of ways, but not in the not fouling category. So, but it did help his soccer game as well. So I think that's you're not alone in that. But I know that too, because anytime you watch someone, you're like, yep, they play soccer.
Right.
If they're on the basketball court,
I
it's
got a
fun.
little caveat. So I actually played basketball in college as well.
No, there
I
you go.
when I first got there, I approached the head soccer coach, said, hey, can I play? You okay if I try out? Said, yeah, if you want to, that's fine. I talked to the basketball coach. He said, unless you're here on report day, you can't play for me. I'm like, that's fine. And then actually my junior year, the old coach was fired and they got a new coach. And so I'm like, I wonder if. And so I said, hey, can I come try out? And the coach was like, absolutely. So I actually played 1 year varsity at Ohio Wesleyan.
That's awesome. I actually will let my I'm gonna let my son know about this because he is at Biola playing soccer and his basketball is really his love as far as a sport. But like his father, he's not as tall as he probably needs to be to play there. But he was actually playing there in the gym, and he says to the basketball coach, who happened to be there at the same time, he's like, "Hey, coach, if I make this, can I play on the team?" And the coach said, "Nope." He ended up making the shot, but he still couldn't play on the team. But maybe he's got a shot. You're saying there's a chance basically here if
Right.
that coach retires.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You never know. You should always at least ask. Worst thing you
That's
do is
exactly right.
right where you're at, right?
That's exactly right. That's what I tell the kids all the time. Just ask. The worst they can say is no, then you're in the exactly same spot you were before. So all right. Well, that I love that. That's so good. Just talk. I love that he gave you the shot again. I love that you missed it and you kept playing. You didn't let you just, a lot of people be crushed by that, right? And like, forget it, I'm done. But you just kept shooting. And obviously, you learned how to hit that outside shot at some point, or else you wouldn't have played in college either. But let's get back to AIA. As you can see, I'm representing, as we talked about before the interview. I got my Athletes in Action shirt. Athletes in Action is near and dear to my heart. My wife was on staff before we got married. We have a lot of mutual friends in the AIA world, and I absolutely love what AIA is doing in the U.S. and all around the world. But talk a little bit about your work specifically and how you're using soccer to share the gospel and make disciples within the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those funny things within soccer. I learned really early on that regardless of where I go around the world, it draws people. And so there's something beautiful and magnetic about this ball that you can take, like I said, anywhere, and whether you not fully understand language or culture, it doesn't matter if you have the ball. And so there's something that drew me to this sport that also draws billions of people. And when I was given the opportunity to be able to take the sport that I love and begin to match that and overlap that with my faith in Jesus, that really that would just opened up a myriad of doors for me. And Athletes in Action is the medium organization to be able to do that. And that for me was amazing. And so being able to take this this idea of this relationship I have with Jesus and using that within the sport, really began to get a vision of how do we transform and redeem soccer. Like, what does it look like for God to be a part of this sport that I love and love Him fully as well? And that's something I've been on this journey for 20 years doing. So being able to travel all over the world and seeing how soccer and football has transformed, really bring community together, but also recognizing that the good news of Jesus, how that's also transforms not only present communities but also for all eternity, and being able to be able to match those two, marry those two, has been an amazing experience. And so still doing it within the pro world, was able to do it with university athletes. And then internationally, we've been traveled all over the world to be able to use this beautiful game to really begin to transform communities in the present, but again, most importantly, for all eternity, and telling about Jesus.
And so what would be just a couple strategies that you've used? I mean, obviously there's just one-on-one conversations, and that's probably primary what God is using in what you're doing. But what are some of the other strategies just to get in and kind of build trust in communities that you might not otherwise, whether it's a pro soccer team or other places? Because you got to earn the conversation, right? So how are you able to kind of get in and build that trust and earn those conversations?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, is presence and consistency. There's the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. There's something about kindness and consistency that is just transcends hearts and breaks down walls and barriers and that kind of stuff. And so being present, being available, being seen, being able to step into people's worlds and their lives, not to tell them how to do things, but to be available and listen. Listening is one of those things that is, it's a lost art. But when you're around someone that listens well, it's transformative. And so being present and just being available, being able to sit there and listen, whether it's one-on-one or within a team setting or dynamic, is powerful. And then in this consistency is that one of the things early on is that we'd gone on a couple of trips where we popped into a country, we connected with some people and then left. And we saw the initial excitement of it, but then the back end, we realized we're actually not helping the people that we're serving. And so how do we begin to really help and build into and assist and add value to the countries and the cities and the people that we're building into internationally? And so we asked, and they said, well, we need consistency. And so we said, okay. So we began to make these multi-year contracts and partnerships with these cities and these clubs and these individuals within these various countries. And the growth was exponential, and the impact was exponential because of the consistency of showing up, not just once for a few weeks, but actually coming back every 6 months and multiple weeks, and not just one, and having multiple groups going to the same spaces. Really began to have that consistency. And it's the same and true with the pro environment. So I'm working with the pro guys, pro team, North Carolina Football Club. I'm there every week, and the guys, the new guys are always like, who is this guy? Why is he here? What does he do? But I keep showing up. How are you doing today? What's been going on? How can I help you? How can I pray for you? And then just listening, and that consistency really begins to build that bridge of trust in order to really build into their lives. So that consistency and that presence is huge.
Yeah, it's so good. That's so good. And I think that goes for really any work you want to do with people.
Yeah.
I don't, that's just presence, consistency. And when you say presence, it's not just being there, but actually being present, right? We talk about this a lot in the families. There's a lot of dads who are there, but they're not present,
Right.
And the difference is everything. Right. And so to actually be there, part of being present is listening. And I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that's so that right there, I think, is worth the interview. I mean, I think that there is so important for people to understand, for coaches as well. I think that's critical in the lives of your players, is for them to know that you're there and you're present and you're consistent and you will be there. And I think that honestly, in the college game, I think that's one of the struggles with a lot of people is they don't know if their coach is going to be there when they're, for the full 4 years and things like that, which is an interesting dynamic. And the coaches don't know that sometimes, so that sometimes they're not fully pouring in as they should. So anyway, that's just another little side note there. But I don't know, Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, in some ways, I think just to spell out some things for different people, a lot of what we're talking about here is chaplaincy, right? That's the word in some ways. I think as a coach, sometimes you struggle with someone who comes in and thinks they're just going to come be your team chaplain, and like they don't have any idea what that really means. But the showing up is not just like, hi, I'm here to serve your team. Tell me how you're doing. I think the best chaplains and folks that really poured into our players are the ones that just showed up and served. They showed they really wanted to be there. Like they wanted to be around the team. They wanted to, they wanted to be there. Like they're handing out water, or they're picking up trash, or they're there at the beginning of practice, they're there at the end of practice, they're there at games, they're seeing the environment that folks are into. It's kind of like what you're saying about going to different countries, and you just show up, you do your thing, and you leave. It's also the same thing when you're working with colleges, or even probably pro teams too, where it's consistency of showing up and showing like, hey, like it's not about me and me wanting like the swag that I get because I get to work with your team. Like I don't care about any of that. I really just want to be able to serve you however this team needs to be served. And I think that's an important point from my perspective as a coach, because the relationship that's built through Christ is such a big deal. As a coach, you want to trust that person who has that relationship with your players, so I want that bond with my chaplain or whoever's coming in to pour in the love of God into my players as well. Because if as a coach, like Phil is saying, if I can't do that as a coach, I want someone to fill that role, but I've got to be able to trust them. And how do you build trust? Show up consistently and be there as a servant in some ways, and show that, hey, I just really want to be here. I don't know, you have more practical experience on that side of it than I do. How does that resonate when you hear me say things like that?
Absolutely. So people often talk about like, what makes a good chaplain. I do character coach, I do integration of faith and sport, all this larger umbrella for like holistic care. Like how are you most effective? And really it's at the epicenter is trust. So one of the things we've been talking a lot about recently with the pro guys with North Carolina Football Club is that trust is a soil in which everything else grows. It's just that reality that to grow team cohesiveness, the willingness to sacrifice our team values, or relation with Christ, all those different things that are part of what I get to do. At the essence, trust is at the epicenter of all of that. And when there is no trust, you naturally cap yourself on the depth, on the impact, on how far you can go as a coach, as a chaplain, as an investor of people. So trust is so important, so important.
Yeah, no, totally. Not to transition this way, but let's shift for a second to something else. How do you like that, huh?
That was nice. Love it.
That was pretty good, right? Let's shift.
Yeah,
Let's shift.
Paul, it's rubbing off. The segues are unbelievable.
Yep. We're gonna shift here, and folks, you'll figure this out in a second. Maybe Phil mentioned it earlier. I can't remember, but I want to talk about your book, Jonathan. You have a book. It's called Shift, and there you go, folks. I just connected it for you guys. It really talk about Shift, your work with athletes, and the idea of helping them transition to life after elite athletics. It's something that's really big for me, not because I was an elite athlete and I had the transition, but working even with college athletes, my wife having been a professional and seeing that world and just the identity that's around, an athlete and what that looks like to move on. And just love to hear your book, about your book, and tell us a little bit about why you wrote it. Like why did you choose that? I mean, I don't know if I'll ever write a book, and probably it's because I just don't know what I would write about. There's so many things that I would love to say. Why'd you choose it, and tell us about it?
Yeah, it was funny. So a lot of times when you're in the midst of transition, you don't realize what's happening because it's like almost like running on sand at times. And so when I stopped playing, it's just like that's just what you do. Like didn't really get an opportunity to play professionally. I had some trials and that kind of stuff, but it's just like I got married. I'm like it's not for me. I was talking to my buddies that were playing professionally. They're making $400 a month and living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 other guys and just living on ramen. I'm like, I have no desire for that. So I just sort of, as I navigated that transition, I had these feelings and just going through this grieving process, and honestly stuffed it down. Didn't really just move on with life. And then fast forward to about 12 years ago, we moved from Ohio to North Carolina. began to work directly with the pro team here, as well as just more strategically located as visiting teams and connections and networks. And then you have University of North Carolina, NC State, and Duke, and the national team was coming training here as well. So we moved down here, and all of a sudden I began to have all of those same feelings that I had when I was 23. Like the same sense of transition, uneasiness, grief. And I'm like, what is this? Like, it's not new. It feels familiar. It's like a deja vu moment, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I began to just grow from a self-awareness, began to really dive a little bit deeper into what was going on in my own heart. And I realized, I'm struggling and feeling this sense of loss, just like I'm losing my relationships back in Ohio. I'm losing friendships, moving away from family, all this, what was familiar, and all those same emotions and anxiety and wrestling that I was experiencing in this move. I was able to draw the line back to when I stopped playing. I love to play. I love the locker room, the environment, the trainings. I love that. I love the competing under the lights, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden it was gone, and at the end of one whistle, and that was it was heartbreaking. And so I began to tie those dots back to that self, my own personal journey that I was going through. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm the only one, right? In isolations, you begin to ask that maybe it's just me. And so when I started working with some of the athletes here locally, I'll be investing in them, mentoring in them. And then, the business world of the sport can be a bit fickle. And so a guy's released, he's cut, or he's traded, or sent on loan. Oftentimes the club brings in a new player, and that old player is forgotten. But because of relationships, because wanting to invest in these men, I was able to maintain relationships with them as they moved on to other clubs or retired. And as I saw these transitions occurring, I began to see the words that they were using were similar to what I experienced. And so I just started to dive a little bit deeper into that. And so I was already writing a little bit of content, some, looking at the Bible, some Bible studies, that kind of stuff. I was already writing some of that. I was doing some other writings periodically here and there. And so I just began to say, what's available? And as I started exploring within the pro soccer world, there really wasn't anything available. So I'd ask, general manager, hey, what do you do for athletes when they retire? Oh, nothing. I had a contact in the Players Association. What do you do when they retire? Nothing really. We maybe offer an internship, but it wasn't well known. There really wasn't any process out there available for athletes. And then so within Athletes in Action, we're also working within the NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball, some of these other spaces. So I started asking those guys, like, well, what's available for athletes from a content standpoint to help them? And the answer kept coming back and was really nothing. If you wanted something to pursue it, you could find something, but there wasn't this broad strokes. And so there was a need. There was a significant gap for athletes in this space. And so I started writing some content, some ideas, working with some athletes in this as they were transitioning. I had a couple guys that were forced to retire due to injury. And that's when it really hit me hard. Was one of the players called me and says, Jonathan, I'm okay. I'm doing okay right now. I'm good. But I'm having these thoughts of suicide. What do I do? And you look at his life, 10 plus year, 10-year career, had won an MLS championship, first round draft pick, checked all the boxes, right? Like you would think, married, loved Jesus, had kids, all these things. So like I said, checked all the boxes on the outside looking in, and he's having these thoughts. And so that's when I was like, okay, this is much bigger than just this small circle, myself and the small circle of people. This is broad. And so I began to be more intentional with creating content for this. And as I was doing that, I got connected with more athletes because they would, athletes talk like, hey, Jonathan's helping in this space, go talk to him. And I got to a point where I didn't have the time and the capacity to continue to meet with more and more athletes. So I go, what do I do then? And so that's when I was like, let's write. So I combination of writing, and then I also created a video course, an online course for athletes to go through that comes with the notebook and this 7 videos, 12 to 15 minutes each video on the 5 steps of shift. And then from there wrote the book and dove a little bit deeper in the different steps to help athletes in that transition.
Yeah, what a huge impact I know you're making on just so many different people. I love that. You mentioned the five steps. Take us through just maybe one or two of those steps to give us an idea what that looks like.
Yeah, the first one is start now, and it's so the S and shift. It's an acronym, and that is really at the heart level of who we are as humans. So it's this reality of identity, who we are, and whose we are, and that is really begin answering those two questions, like who am I, and at the essence, the anchor of who we are has to be cemented in something that can be taken away. And so sport can be taken away. A job can be taken away. There's other things, contracts, multimedia, sponsorships, those all can be taken away. So if the essence in this, what's at the center, the epicenter of who we are and our identity is something that can be taken away, we will always go through a significant grieving and sense of loss, this despair space. And so for me, when I realized that my faith in Jesus is something that can never be taken away. And there's other aspects of who I am. I'm a footballer, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a son, there's different aspects of me. But at the epicenter of who I am is my faith in Jesus. And so when I realize that when that can't be taken away, it gives me confidence in every other aspect of my life, even when things are taken away. So I can no longer perform and play and compete as an athlete like I used to. So that's a part of the grieving process. But and I grieve that loss. But the reality is that doesn't define me at the essence of who I am. And then the other question is, whose am I? It's the idea of worship. We all worship as humans. We worship something or someone. And so the question is what is it? And if I worship a sport, the reality is we all know the sport is fickle. It's going to turn its back on us at some point in time. And so the question is that whose am I? And who am I giving my allegiance to? And again, that is something that it can't be changed. And in the Bible talk about Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so his character, who he is, his words, his promises don't change. And so as a result of that, my worship for him is constant, and that's really an anchor for me. The second thing, part of that start now, is our experiences. Like I said, nothing is wasted. Our story is not wasted. And so our stories really begin to shape who we are. I often talk about the reality that we live our present through the filter of our past. And so when we experience the present moment, we're living and experiencing that through what we've experienced historically. And so we need to know our stories. And so there's an intentionality of remembering what I've experienced in my life. So our stories, what has shaped us. So who've been like the heroes, what have been the heartaches, the hurts, what's been some of the hopes that I had growing up, all these different things to really begin to explore and really growing in that self-awareness. And and then that experience, there's our experience in life allows us to really, it's transferable, whether it's in sport or in life and relationships across the table. So it's helping bridge the gaps between what we learned and experience in sport and putting it into other aspects or other facets of our lives. And then it's our heart, again, looking at what it drives us, or our motivation we talked about earlier on is our why, like why we do what we do. Really begin to tap into that. And then the third step is imagine the future. And that's really begin to have an image of what next could look like. Stephen Covey talks a lot about thinking with the end in mind. And so we take a bit of a revisiting of what that looks like and begin to imagine what future could be. And it could be a year from now, 6 months from now, or it could be 10 years from now, depending on where you're at in your playing career. I'm a firm believer that with the athletes that I work with, is getting, the earlier they start and begin, the better they will be in the long run. And so even though if you're 18 first year pro, like let's begin to think about and plan and leverage your space you're in now for what's to come.
That's so good. I mean, I think I don't want to fly by all of that. I just encourage folks to go grab the book for sure. But I think just going back to that first step, you talking about them, the experiences that they had and how important that is for the future. Because how many players are done like, was this all for nothing? Like, like, what do I do now? Like everything I've done up to this point, is that just like for nothing? And I think that like really tapping into that of like, that's made you kind of who you are, but whose are you, right? And how do you carry that forward into the next phase that God has prepared for you? And I just love that. I didn't want to gloss over that because I just found that so important, because I know even in my own career, I've heard so many people say, what do I do now? Like even when I stepped out of coaching, folks are like, well, what are you going to do? Like what other skills do you have? I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess I just figure it out. I've just been a coach for 20 years. There are no other skills involved in coaching. There's no other skills in playing soccer or any sport, which is an absolute lie, right? So we got to get folks out of that lie. You tapped into it just a little bit. The earlier you can kind of start with some of these things. What are some things that coaches and maybe even parents can do? What are some things they can do to incorporate some of these principles into whether they're coaching or just relationships that they have that can kind of help through this process? Because I think like you've kind of said it. Like, the earlier you can start with this, the better it is on the end goal. And I know we talk a lot about identity, even with kids when we work with kids. What is their identity caught up in? But what are some practical applications that we can use as parents and coaches to help kids start to navigate this before they hit that pylon at the end of the road?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's I think one of the things that is significant is champion these athletes, these men and women to fail early and fail often. There's something with that when you're experiencing new things, it's okay to fail and struggle at things. And that's how you learn new ideas, whether it's in sport, like I said, learning a step over for the first time or a different move or a tactical, whatever it may be. But I think there's also reality in life is that it's okay to try stuff. So one of the things that I remember we're talking with a friend of mine about, he called them externships. I'm like, what's that? He goes, it's stepping in for like 2 days and just shadowing someone in a business environment or a marketing environment or in a classroom as a teacher just for a few days. And so it's instead of this internship, it's a longer term, the externship is just like I said, 2 days to a week at the most. And just allowing you to have an experience. And it's simply to see if this is something that may interest you or not. And so you could do something, like I said, step into a marketing firm and go, wow, I really hate this. I don't want to do this. Okay, great. Well, now you know. Or it could be something you step into an environment where you're like, this is really interesting. I like graphic design. I may want to explore more what this could look like. Or it's you tap into music or to art, and whatever it may be. And I think one of the things your athletes are learning and experiencing, and it's been cool seeing the science is validating this, is that when athletes have hobbies or they have extracurricular activities outside of the sport, they're actually from a mental and emotional capacity side stronger and healthier at their sport. So their performance actually increases with the increase of hobbies and experiences beyond the sport. And so there's something to that, because it allows our brains to rest. And I don't know all the science of it, but it gives our brains the opportunity to rest in the sport space because we're thinking about something different. So thinking more creative or art or music or something else. And as a result of that, actually increases our performance. And so the earlier athletes can begin to step into some of those spaces and just risk and try new things, it's going to not only help them understand what they may want to pursue when they're done playing, but also it's actually going to help them on the field as well as they compete.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I want to say it again. You just said it, but fail early, fail often. I think we become a society that's very protective of what people think of us, and to fail is just, it's not okay. And I think for our children to fail is sometimes a blow to our ego as well as parents. But I want people to hear that. I just think it's such a positive thing for all of us, not just kids, but especially kids when they have the opportunity to fail in a safe environment, right?
Yep.
When kids get to college and it's the first time they've ever been told by a coach, like, hey, I don't think you're good enough, or we've got to do this better, or they've been challenged for the first time. It's a blow, right? It's kind of what you're talking about here. So failing in those safe environments is the best place for these folks to do that. I didn't want to bypass that. I just see that so often, just in our society. We just want everybody to think everything is great, and we want to protect our children so much that we don't allow them to fail in a safe environment, where we can pick them back up and carry them and help them learn the lesson and move forward. So then they can start learning lessons on their own, so that when they're out of the house, then they fail, like, okay, it's okay. I failed before and I'll be okay. So Phil, I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on that too. I think we've talked about it once before, maybe.
Yeah, I love all this. I mean, just so good. I love the who are you and whose are you. Those are questions I ask
Mm-hmm.
people often. As you said, you're worshiping someone or something. And I think it goes both questions. I mean, who are you worshiping should be go back to that question. Who are you? What is something that's grounded in that doesn't change? And we talked with Graham Daniels. I don't know if you're familiar with Graham or Graham, Jonathan, but he's an amazing man who's been through a ton, but he runs Christians in Sport. And we interviewed him a few episodes ago, and he talked about achieved identity versus received identity, which is a similar idea, right? That idea that if you have an achieved identity, it will fail you. And it will be something that when you fail early, fail often, and you're not grounded in that, it can be crushing.
Yes.
But when you have that received identity, it's something that okay, well, this is something I can learn from, right? And that to understand the things that the best things, as we talk about in life, come on just the other side of comfortable. If you're too far out from comfortable, you'll just bail. You'll say, forget it. But just on the other side of comfortable, that's when the really good stuff happens. But if you're there, you're going to be failing, right? As we say, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. My daughter said this to me yesterday. She says, yeah, in shooting drills, she's a striker. She's got a great shot with both feet. But she says in shooting drills, I think too much. And I'm just like, she's overthinking. And I was like, how do you get them to just, and I go, you got to just not care. At some point, you just got to try and try and try, not care when you miss. You just got to keep going. You got to keep shooting, taking the next shot. And then maybe not care is not the right word, but to not let it bother you, right? Because that's not who you are. Just because when you have a bad shot, you're not a bad shooter, right? Those are identity statements. I'm a bad shooter. No, that's an identity statement. You had a bad shot. You're having a bad shooting day. Those are two very different things. And to know that is critical. And I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Paul, something you mentioned earlier too, as when you asked about a coach, I think coaches have the power to create those safe environments. And, I think part of it is it's changing the narrative of how we view failure. So culturally, failure is a bad thing. It's labeled bad. What if we switch the narrative and said, actually, failure is good? Because it's what you just said, Phil. It's like you're pushing the envelope. So the more you fail in those just beyond comfort, actually, the better you're becoming. And in the progression of as a human, in the totality of our lives, we're always have the opportunity to grow and get better. But the only way to do that is to fail. So there's I think one of the things I love this statement. I can't remember who said it initially, where I heard it from, but it said, he or she that fails the most wins. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And at first I was like, that's stupid. Like, that's dumb. Like, no. But then begin to think about it. And the whole point was that you're constantly pushing beyond that comfort space. You're constantly pushing the envelope. You're constantly failing. And as a result of that, you're actually winning. Because you're progressing, you're developing more and more, whether it's in sport, in life, in your relationships, in your vocation, whatever it may be, you're constantly pushing the envelope. So you're allowing yourself to grow and develop. So it's changing the narrative of how we view failure. So failure is actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And so that is significant. But as a coach, we have the opportunity to create the environment for that narrative.
Yeah, I think there's so much goodness there. And I do, like you said, Paul, I encourage folks, go grab that book. Also, Jonathan has a podcast that, as he says, on pause right now, but go check it out. There's like 20 something episodes of that. And really, really good stuff that he goes through talking with athletes who are transitioning to life after sport, and some of those conversations, just there's a lot of rich, great stuff there. So go check those things out. But we talked about coaches, and coaches having tremendous power, coaches having tremendous impact and influence over us. And over, our kids, and so many of us have kids who are playing for coaches. And so as we talk to coaches, there's things we can learn from other great coaches. So who was one of the best coaches, or maybe a couple that come to your mind that you played for they were set apart from the rest as far as just great leaders? What about them stuck out, and what'd you learn from him or her that you're using today?
Yeah, great question. I mentioned earlier, like I said, my basketball coach is Coach Kaiser, called him Coach K. He was the first one that I really began to see the impact that a coach can have in someone's life, because of the impact he had in my life, of what he saw in me. And like I said, I didn't think highly of myself, but he saw something in me that was amazing. That's like, oh, I see something in you, and I believe in you, and I want to champion you. And so that was having that was huge for me. And then the next coach I had in college was Jay Martin. And Jay was, you looking back at some of the things that we did visualization and goal setting back in the 90s. And that wasn't like now that's common to do some of these practices, but we were doing things that were at the time was sort of cutting edge. And one of the things I learned from Jay is that he was a consummate learner. He was always reading something. He was always looking what's new, what's available, what's being challenged, what's something that we can have as our bedrock or foundation to build upon. What are different things that we can continue to find an edge from a holistic standpoint of the athletes that were part of the program. And I remember that early on my freshman year, we had the beep test. And I was finalizing my class schedules, came preseason before school started, and I had to change one of my classes. So I'm like, hey Jay, I gotta change my class. So I gotta go wait in line. He goes, I might be a little late to practice. He was like, no problem. So I ended up missing the beep test. I was like, yes, I missed the beep test. I have to do it. But one of the things he said was, he goes, academics for here are first. He goes, like, I want you, the reality is that the degree and what you learn academically will last you for your life. Also, what you learn athletically will also last your life. But they're both equal playing field. And I don't want to emphasize one over the other, because they're both are going to have value in your life. And so this idea of what does it look like to continually learn and learn and learn. The unfortunate thing was the next day I showed up at practice for the first from the morning session. He goes, all right, Van Horn, beep test, the cones are set up for you. And I was like, ah. But it was that reality that he showed me in that moment of the importance of continuing to learn, never be above the people in the room, the books, the people that has already been written. You'll never fully arrive, and you always have an opportunity to grow and to learn and develop in some capacity. And so be intentional to be that learner in the room. Be curious.
Yeah, love it.
I love the stories of everybody's experiences from their story of how the game impacted them to the impact that coaches have had on players' lives. I think we can all relate. All have different stories, somewhat similar but different. And I love that, and I love how people are part of our stories, and how we can reference coaches and things that they've done and how they've impacted us in different ways, and just hopefully an encouragement to our coaches that listen to this or watch this, that sometimes you may not know it, but you're making an impact. It's either a good impact or a bad impact, but I hope most of us are making a positive impact on our players. So appreciate you sharing that. As we kind of move along a little bit, I want to talk about the game itself. And you've been involved in the game for a long time. You've played it up to the college level. You've been around professionals. You've seen the game in other countries. I'd say you're pretty familiar with the game and its ins and outs. And I'd just love to hear kind of your perspective on where the game is right now in the United States. Maybe some things you think are going well for us as a country, whether it's youth or professional, whatever you want to kind of address. And maybe some things you think maybe we could do a little bit better. I'd love to hear your perspective on those things.
Yeah, I think when you think about some of the movement toward, especially the small-sided and the game and environments, that was something that I missed out on when I was younger. And seeing the emphasis of that, like I said, the small sides, the rondos, like that was something we just didn't do. And so that was something I missed out from a technical standpoint in those early years. And it's so important to get touches on the ball. And that was something that's like, go out and juggle. So I would do that. But there's something about, like I said, playing a little 5v2 or something like that, or the 4v4s and 4v4 plus ones, and being in some of those environments now with the youth is so important, just to get some game-esque experiences plus the technical side of things. Again, and realizing that was a deficiency that I had throughout the totality of my career. That was always the biggest critique. Jonathan, you're not technical enough. You have the athleticism, you have the height, you have the speed, you have all the different things, but you have the IQ, you're just not technical enough. And reflecting back on my growing up, those first 5-6 years of playing, that was one of the biggest things. And that continue to emphasize that. And then as I go overseas internationally, that's happening all of the time. There's always, whether it's in the street or on the training ground, like you're always seeing this 3v3, 2v2, 4v4 in type of environments from a technical standpoint. And you're seeing these kids learning the game. Something too that's like that I've just really valued is the opportunity we get to see games all the time.
Mhm.
Monday night, 11:30 p.m. That was the EPL game of the week for me. That I was I was able to watch the one game. And I would sneak downstairs when I was, 14, and turn on the TV when everyone else was sleeping, and I'd get to I would watch the EPL game. And now it's everywhere. And so for me as a basketball player, what allowed me to be so successful was able to watch it. And so seeing that. So those are, I think, some of the positives moving forward. I think some of the things that, again, we hinted on earlier as far as the specialization. I think there's just something about being able to play multiple sports and being able to have those experiences, perspectives that's needed and need to be emphasized. I don't know how many parents I've talked with have 8-year-old sons and daughters, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're traveling to Orlando, and we're going to Atlanta, we're going to Vegas for tournaments," and I'm like, "Your kid's 8, like what? Like why?" And they're like, "Well, that's
Mhm.
what's needed to be successful." And I mean, that just, and not only is it affecting the children as an athletic standpoint, I think from a family standpoint,
Mhm.
it's really, they're having a significant impact where they're spending more time in hotels and at like a McDonald's or Chipotle or whatever, versus being around a dinner table together as a family and doing activities or playing games or having moments together and having those experiences together. And so it's really disrupting community and disrupting family dynamics and developments of kids, because they're really missing out. They're missing out on those community and those family relationships that need to be cultivated, because they're playing in a tournament, that's a 4-hour flight away from where they live.
Yeah, and I've seen that, even in our family, we got a big family, but having 4 soccer players, and you have to be so intentional to have, the family dinners. As they talk about, that's like the number one indicator, or one of the top 2 or 3 indicators of success in life after, college, is how many family dinners you had, um, sitting down at a table with your family. As far as and so that's something that we have to be so very intentional, not even just because of the travel, but also just the practice schedules and the craziness of the year round, and no seasons of anything anymore, and I love, my son played little league this year, and he's 12, and he also plays soccer, and but to have a season, it was refreshing. It was, oh, we started in March and we ended in, early June. It was like, this was incredible. I was like, that's what we used to do, trying to explain that to the kids. This is what it used to be like. And then we'd start soccer in sometime in July. And that's the way it was. And I think that that's something that, we've talked a lot about that on the show. And I don't think you're definitely not alone in that concern. But I think you brought up something that is near and dear to my heart, and the work that I do with vulnerable children and families around the world, is the impact on families and the breakdown of families. I don't think it's any coincidence that families are breaking down at a greater clip in the last, few decades, when youth sports have taken this massive toll on families, because not only are the kids going different directions, but the parents are going different directions because the kids are going different directions, right? And so that's something that we just really need to, I think, put more focus on, and be able to encourage people to say, hey, what's more important here? That your kid can get a few more practices, a few more games, or your family. So that's something that I absolutely agree with, and glad you brought that up.
And I think
Um,
it
Go
also
ahead.
just, so I think it creates, from a community standpoint, there's, in our world today, our kids have access to so much information, but they often don't know what to do with it. And those family
Mm,
meals, that connection, give us the opportunity to help them. What do I do with this? What do I do with, with this smartphone that I have in my hand, that I can Google anything in the world and find out information? But I don't know how to navigate with the information that I actually have. And those dinners and those meals together create opportunity from a community, from a family standpoint, to actually to learn how to be human, how to grow, and what it means to do what you do with all this information.
yeah.
And again, a lot of that's being lost because it's now they're on the roads with their buddies and their teammates and coaches, and they're asking questions that historically have been answered by parents, that are no longer being answered, and they're just left to figure it out on their own. And as a
Yeah.
12, 13, 14-year-old, that's just really hard.
Absolutely. And even on the other side of that too, is that most of the coaches are not the parents anymore, right? They're professional coaches who are, that's what they do. And many of them don't have families. Many of them are young, just out of college, a few years out of college, don't have families of their own, haven't lived that life experience to be able to answer those questions. These kids are living basically college lives from the sports side of things from 12, 13, 14. And so, yeah, those are things that I think aren't talked about a lot. But to your point, like they're with those people way more than they're with their families. And it's not just like, oh, well, it's a season. No, it's not a season. It's all the time. And that's what they're told you have to do or else you can't make it. And that's just a lie. It's just a lie. And so that's something, yeah. Hopefully, I mean, we talked with Skip Gilbert, who's the USYS CEO, and talking through these similar things on, okay, what can we do about it? What does it look like? And that's the question that I think we all see the issues now. How do we actually make a dent into it? And I think it starts with just families like ours, just saying, okay, we're going to choose to not buy into it at that level. And what does that look like? And kind of go further. Because the reality is most kids choose not to play at some point.
Right. That's right.
They're either burning out or they're just not their love.
Yep.
And so why, when you look back at that, and the parents are like, well, we invested all this into it. And then the kids feel bad. Some of them keep playing just because they feel bad. And that's not the right reason to play a sport when you're committing so much. So anyway, that's a whole nother conversation that we could have for hours and hours that we don't have time for. We are going to kind of finish up here with the last couple questions that we do ask all of our guests. And the first is, how have you used the lessons you've learned directly from the game of soccer in your marriage and your parenting? Go back to that family conversation.
Yeah, it's I think part of it is mentioned as far as from a development standpoint is that I realized that there's always growth. There's growth opportunities. And I think for me, as a husband, as a father, I can continue to get better at it. So what is the depth and the richness as a husband and a father each and every day? The other thing too is just from the game is the power of presence I mentioned earlier is how do I intentionally be present in the spaces that I'm in with my kids, with Rachel, my wife, and I have 3 girls, so with my girls as well, so what does it look like to be able to do that? And then, I think part of it too, for me is from a sports standpoint is there's a passion side of it. I love the game, love being a part of the game, love playing, love being around it. And that's, I think, part of it. That the lesson has been is step into spaces that you enjoy. Like, even if it's hard, I still enjoy it. And so that's something that's like I look for opportunities to things that I'm passionate and enjoy, even though they're difficult and they're hard. Is that there's moments that really come to life, and that's something the sport has provided for me. So looking for those opportunities beyond soccer is like when I enjoy something. So from a coaching standpoint, from an investment standpoint, I love that. I love being a part of people's lives in that process. And so looking for those.
Yeah. Good. Last official question. What have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership? And you can't say shift.
Great questions. There's I would say probably the most significant collectively has been the Bible. Is there's a lot of the principles. One of the things more recently I've been talking about the power of conflict. People often see conflict as a negative thing. For me, conflict is actually a positive thing because it forces us to understand, why am I feeling this way? If I'm angry about something else that happens, why am I feeling this way? So it's something inside of me, owning my emotions, but it's also forcing me to put myself in the shoes of someone else. And seeing life and the environment and the situation through their perspective, and being able to learn from that. And so there's a passage in the Gospel of Matthew 18 on how to navigate conflict, and it's going directly to that person and working through the differences, but also recognizing that you may not be able to come to a difference, you may not be able to come to a conclusion, and then the next progression is bring 1 or 2 other trusted people. So from a team environment, it's a captain, or maybe there's a leadership team within a leadership council within that team. It's help bringing those people in to navigate and solve the conflict. But it forces us to become better people, better humans, growing and developing. And so that's something that's been significant for me. I would say, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one for me. As of late, I've been listening to a lot more podcasts. So there's an individual on LA, his name's Erwin McManus. He's someone I've been listening to a lot. I really value his perspective. He's coming out with a book called Mind Shift. And which is sort of funny. Like, I can't say shift, we made part of it. But it's this idea of the power of the mind, and so I think part of a lot of what I've experienced is from a mental standpoint, is that we often are the one who limits our impact and growth ourselves. And it's all happens up here in our heads. And so how do we begin to overcome the limiting beliefs that we have created for ourselves? And we naturally create these barriers because maybe someone told us something, whatever. And so that's something. He's someone, some of his podcasts, some of his teachings as of late has been significant for me in that regard. And then another author is Jason Jaggard. He's a guy, he's a West Coast guy as well. And he's really been significantly, he's an executive coach and runs a firm called Novus Global. So a lot of his writings have been significant over the last probably 6 to 8 months.
That's a great list. A shout out to Erwin McManus. His book, The Way of the Warrior, had a massive impact on me and Marcy as we were navigating the creation of what is now Warrior Way. Really not, it is somewhat of a coincidence of the naming of it, but that he's a great writer and has a lot of great insights into a lot of things. So thanks for sharing that, for sure. That's great stuff.
I don't know this for sure, but I think you may have recommended that book in the interview you did back in long time ago in episode number 2, or at some point you've recommended
back
that
when
book.
I was a guest.
Yes, back when you were just a guest,
just a guest.
So
just like,
or maybe
like
when
Jonathan.
you were a guest and now you're just a co-host. I don't know. I don't know which it is. Yeah. So maybe that's what it is. I think that's probably what it is. Yeah, I think both of you guys plug very well, the mind shift. I get it. You found someone that was doing something that had the name of the book in it. And then Paul, you got to bring up Warrior again. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I like it. I like it. That's very good. That marketing you talked about, Jonathan, there, that you're now working in marketing and so it's just, that's just, you're natural. You guys are naturals at that. That's amazing. Well, thanks again, Jonathan. Thank you for just taking the time to be part of this. And I appreciate everything you're doing. I absolutely love it. I love that we're able to, kind of work together on some different things and connect each other with different people and outside the podcast as well. And so I appreciate you and keep at it, brother.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being on the show today.
All right, folks. Well, thanks again for being a part of this, and thanks. I do hope that you're able to engage this and that you're able to give us some feedback. If you haven't rated in the show and reviewed it, if you can go do that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you get this, that would be great. Not only because it gets it out there to more people, but because we love to hear your feedback, how we could make the show better. And any guests you have that you think would be good for us, please send them our way. We'd love to be able to get the good wisdom they have out to you and other people around the world. So if you want to learn more about Warrior Way that Paul had mentioned, you can get that at warriorway.com, warriorwaysoccer.com, right? warriorwaysoccer.com. Yes. And coachingthebiggergame.com if you want to learn about what we're doing with that. With everything, folks, most importantly, we hope that what you're taking from, you're learning from this show, you're using it to help you to be a better parent, a better spouse, a better leader, a better friend, better in everything that you do. And you continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.